entertaining, and I think that's a subject we all have on our minds that we don't want to talk. We don't talk about it much, but it's on our minds. We're going to speech number 2, which will be given by Robert Eisenberg, and his variant will be Rob Cancel. Once again, another role for Rob. He will deliver the objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Robert Eisenberg, our VP of Education, is coming to the podium. For those of us who have been around for a few years, we may recognize the speech. Robert gave it before when we were at the old location, and it's in preparation for the announcement earlier coming up to give his performance at Temple Isaiah. And the piece is called "The Next Time Someone Tells Me They're a Witch, I'll Believe Them." So what I'm going to be watching for, Robert, is your flow, how well the story flows. I'm going to be looking around the audience to see if you're holding their interest. I'm going to be checking to see if your voice was loud and clear, your posture, and whether you were able to deliver some humor through this dark story. Other observations and improvements that you might make.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm going to go Michael's. This story has a bit of a history. I joined my Temple Brotherhood probably over 20 years ago. And the first assignment I got was to pick up the wine for our annual dinner. Well, they told me I did such a great job doing the picking up of the wine that I could now be in charge of the dinner the next year. Well, I had a cooking background, so that would not be a problem. I cooked a vegan dish. Everybody loved it. They were surprised at what an amazing cook I was. Of course, I wasn't surprised because of my cooking background. However, I decided that I was going to do stories. I had never done stories in front of an audience before. The year before, they had a comedian that nobody liked. He charged $400, and of course, I'd be free. I figured right away I had a big advantage. I got my stories together. I got in front of this audience, and they hated me. I was about 10 minutes into my stories, and they're looking at their watches. At the end of the evening, I got mixed reviews. Some said I was awful. Some said I was just bad. My daughter Rebecca, who is here tonight, is in the business of working for different cables, and she videoed me. It took me 3 months to get the nerve to watch myself. And you know what? I wasn't that bad. Oh, I had a lot to learn. I could only get better. But it was really the audience's fault. And one of the reasons it was the audience's fault is Jerry Seinfeld said it all. He said he hates to perform in New York City because everybody in the audience thinks they're funnier than he is. And everybody in that audience thought that they were a better storyteller than me. Anyway, I told this story that night, the witch story. And I've only told it once or twice at Toastmasters, and I also told it at Tufts some years later, and they loved it. And why? Because they were a brilliant audience. Anyway, I was sitting on a plane, leaving Cleveland, heading for Boston, when the pilot announced that we had just lost our brakes. We were 36,000 feet in the air, and of course, everybody in the plane was horrified. But I was most horrified, because I knew that it was my fault. I knew that all of these people were going to die, and that I would never see my kids again because of what I had done. I have to take you back a few years, when I was the vice president in charge of design and sales at a company in New Hampshire. And I had a fellow working for me we'll call Phil, mainly because his name was Phil. And Phil would call me just about every Sunday night, and he would talk to me about Ray, our boss. And he would say kind of mean things and go beyond. And the boss hated me, and I hated the boss. And of course, I would add to everything that Phil said. What I didn't know was that Phil was going back to the boss and telling him word for word what I said about him. I had no knowledge of that, of course. Well, every year we had conventions, and mostly they were in New York City. And it was a grueling day, you know, we'd be showing our product and people would come in constantly, and we'd have to work from about 7:30 in the morning to at least 8 at night. So it was a difficult day, and at the end of the day we celebrated with food and drink. And Phil's wife invariably came to our wine and food celebration. And she loved to shop in New York. And she would come back with strange objects that she would show me. I never quite understood what they were. And she would tell me stories about her and Phil and the relationship and how she had punched him in the nose when he aggravated her too much. And there was Phil standing there with a stupid grin on his face, nodding, saying, yes, she punched me right here. And one time she came over to me and sidled up to me and she said, Robert, you're not going to believe this, but I'm a witch. And I'm looking at her with disbelief. And she sees the disbelief in my face and she says, I know you don't believe me. She says, I only hope I never have to prove it to you. Naturally, I forgot about this incident, and inevitably the boss called me in maybe a year later, and he fired me. He said, I've heard that you said these things about me, and I want you out of here. But I went to work for a competitor, and things were going quite well. And one of our customers decided to move to Columbus, Ohio and build a new building and invited all the vendors to this place. Well, I was having a wonderful time at this party. I was seeing old friends, I was laughing, they were laughing. It was just a great event when I saw Phil. There he was in a corner, and I'm praying, Phil, please don't come near me. But of course my prayers didn't work. And Phil came over. And he looks at me and he says, I hear great things about you. I lost it. The nice things I said about him were, you're a sanctimonious, double-crossing worm. Those were the nice things. Phil crawled away to a telephone booth, I'm sure to call his wife the witch. This all came back to me when the pilot announced that we had no brakes. I remembered word for word what Phil's wife had said, that I hope I never have to prove to you that I'm a witch. And here I am on the plane, watching the flight attendants telling us to sit up straight, like this is going to change the crash. She's telling us to lower our heads, like this is going to have an effect on a plane coming down at 500 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to see my kids again, because I was such an idiot and I had to lose it, and I didn't show any forgiveness. Could I be absolved? Well, I looked down at the runway in Dallas, and there was foam all over the runways and fire engines everywhere, and I'm thinking, this is it. A few minutes later, the plane landed. One of the smoothest landings I've ever had in my life. The pilot announced, we didn't lose our brakes, it was a computer mistake. People who had been crossing themselves on the plane, people who had the rosary beads out. I even saw people with Jewish faces crossing themselves. They were complaining that they were going to miss their next connection. All I could think of was get to a phone booth and call the witch and thank her for only giving me a warning.